Ponerology is the study of evil, from the Greek word poneros, one of the Greek words for evil, and it was called that because the author Andrew Łobaczewski, he was a Polish psychologist, so he was grew up. I think he was born in like 1921 thereabouts. Can't remember off the top of my head. So he grew up in the 20s and 30s, and so lived through the Nazi occupation and then the imposition of communism in circa 1950. And so, as a psychologist, he and others were interested in the psychological nature of what they are experiencing, referred to by various names. So, communism, totalitarianism, and eventually he came up with, with the help of some Benedictine monks, he came up with the word ponerology as a kind of an overall word to describe what he considers like a new interdisciplinary branch of science, and that would be like the scientific study of evil. And so he called his book Political Ponerology because the book was specifically focused on the application and the manifestation of evil in a political situation, a political climate. So ponerology more broadly would be, he would probably define it as like the psychological and biological study of like the psychological and biological underpinnings of what we consider evil in human behavior.
So just could I ask, what year did he write the book again?
Well, that's something of a story because he wrote it several times. He was working on it in the I can't remember when he first started working on a first draft, but he was working on it for sure in the 60s and 70s.
Wow.
And then he left Poland in the late 70s and without a copy because he would either he had to destroy one manuscript and then lost possession of another one. And so he rewrote the book like from scratch when he was living in New York in the early 80s. So he wrote the current, like the edition that we now have, which is published, he wrote in the early 80s and kind of self-published it in 1984, 85. That means he basically just had a few copies like typed up and printed, and I believe he left one he left a few at university libraries at the time in New York, but it was only ever published in an actual edition that you could buy in 2005, 2006. Okay. So that's when the company that I work for, Red Pill Press, published the first edition of the book, and since then it's been in print ever since. And we put out a second edition, second revised edition, where we checked over the translation, added a bunch of footnotes, a bunch of extra. That's something I've been thinking about for years. I made a post about it a year or two ago, and this I kind of just referred back to it and gave an example. So the ternary form it's a musical form. So it's a musical term where you in a musical piece you'll have a theme or a statement or a motif or a section of music, and it's typically called the A section. Mm-hmm. And then a B section will sound completely different. New melody, maybe the same key, maybe not. And then after that second section, which contrasts with the first section again will repeat. So it'll be an A-B-A form. And oftentimes that repetition of the A will be slightly modified. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it'll be modified, but the modifications the way I put it is that when the theme restates at the end, it has taken on new meaning because of the contrasting B section. So you'll get A and then B and then A, which is what would the word be? Imbued with a new meaning because of the existence of A. After having heard B, after having heard the second section, after the first section, you get a new understanding of the first section,
like a narrative.
So, yeah. Okay. And so I related that to I've always, ever since I was a teenager, I would see things about human nature or about the progression of a person's life or something like that in that form. So I gave a couple examples in the article that I linked to in the Ternary Form article. One is just a reference to a famous T.S. Eliot quotation where he talks about coming home and or what's I can't even remember the quote, but you come home with a new sense of the meaning of what home is when you come back home again
Yeah,
after a certain adventure or something like that.
absolutely.
And so the example that I gave in this article was the conception of supernatural evil.
Hmm.
And instead of seeing the ABA form kind of play out in a person's life, or just or a certain feature of their personality, or their belief system, I looked at it just briefly. It's just really a small thought exercise over the course of centuries, where our initial conception of evil was purely supernatural,
Hmm.
where we saw everything that we would consider today to be like mental illness as a product of, let's say, demonic possession.
Yeah.
And so there was very little understanding of what we consider today to be mental illness. Let's say psychosis or schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And then along came the kind of psychiatric movement in psychology, and nowadays we see these as purely biological, psychological, sociological phenomena, and there's no supernatural element whatsoever. And I regard that largely as a result of just our scientific materialist worldview that the mainstream kind of operates under, that all of academia operates under, a set of strict kind of metaphysical presuppositions on the nature of reality that excludes anything supernatural, by whatever definition of supernatural there might be.
Hmm.
And so what I see, or what I kind of predict and want to see happen, is that A prime, that new restatement of the initial theme of supernatural evil, where I actually think it makes sense and it's rational, and there are good reasons to
I do too.
to believe in supernatural evil, but maybe not exactly as we saw it in the past. But so to the way I see it is take the best of both worlds. And I quote, there was a scholar, I think a biblical scholar, I believe, or a religious scholar.
Was it Klepper?
Klepper.
Okay.
And she was talking about this this guy. What was his name? Father Albert or something.
I can go ahead and just read this short little quoted sentence.
And so to kind of weave this back to the discussion of like demonic possession, I actually think that that psychopathy and demonic possession are two separate things. Okay. Psychopaths are more like if demons actually were alive in human form. Like that's kind of how I see a psychopath. Is they're not possessed by something else. They're just, they're more like just flesh and blood demons that are in human form. Yeah. Possession, usually, from my reading about it, and the cases that I've read, it's more the case of a like you were describing in the quotes that you read. It's a more or less normal person who has feelings, who has like a normal range, but who emotional range, but who is oppressed and tortured. So demonic possession is more like the result of it's more like the children that are the victims of these
absolutely
of these things, is that it destroys them to the point where maybe then they can be possessed. And so I see those as kind of two of the main branches of evil. It's like psychopaths, I don't see them as possessed. I see them more as just kind of, almost like the pawns, or the earthly soldiers of a higher demonic force than actually being possessed themselves.
Absolutely. And so again, this that I'm about to say is what a lot of I guess you could say practicing Luciferian Satanists, people who do this to children, what they believe, and this is pretty messed up, but they truthfully do believe that the method by which a demon is inserted is through ritual sodomy of a child. That's what they believe. They believe that it is a way to insert a demon, and this being done to somebody at a very young age, that's their whole idea, is that this has to be done before a certain age. And what it does is they believe it gives them this demon. And exactly what you said, the people who have been on the receiving end of it, the survivors of it, are, for the most part, some of the strongest people I've ever seen, just because if they are able to overcome that and become a functioning person again, that requires just a lot of work. And I've yet to really see anybody who's done it without faith in some sort. Mainly, they end up in Christianity, but it's very rare that people do it without some sort of faith system. So I am truthfully inclined to believe that it is a demon that they're inserting in the higher level sense of just what happens when you do that to a child. I mean, that is a demon. That emotional baggage is demonic possession. And I think that's the true nature of it in similar senses.
Yeah, it's like the fracturing of the child's psyche.
Yep.
I'm gonna speak kind of metaphorically, but when you break a person's psyche, it creates openings.
Yes.
And so the tortures and the traumas create these psychological openings that can then be exploited by otherworldly beings.
Absolutely.
They kind of see they see an opening, they see a weakness, and they take it. Because mental health, the way I kind of conceive of mental health is like a well built castle. It's like it's orderly. Things are going on as they should. There's a gate, a front gate where certain things are let in, certain things are kept out. But everything is controlled. If you have a structure that's in shambles, well then enemies and thieves can just sneak in and take whatever they want or take up residence. And I think that's an more or less accurate metaphor or image of what the psyche actually is.
Boundaries.
And so, yeah. And especially a child. So a child hasn't learned any of those techniques. They haven't had the opportunity to develop those strategies and those techniques and that mental strength. And so that's why it's the biggest sin, I think, is abusing a child like that, is because it's an exploitation of that natural weakness.
Absolutely.
Like, so that their family by extension should be providing that protection. But for whatever reason, whether the family's involved or just absent, it's exploiting the natural weakness of a child to create that psychological opening that is then exploited by other types of and so you mentioned one example, and there are several in ufology. Like to kind of bring this back to how we started the discussion, in ufology there are a couple researchers in the 90s called the two unspeakables of ufology. So these were two of the issues that came up repeatedly in research, but that most even ufologists were uncomfortable acknowledging, talking about publicly. They just, it was like you just don't talk about it. And so there were two things: missing children and human mutilations.
Okay.
So we've heard. So no, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just okay. That really, once you said that, because I didn't know what you were going to say, that gets into interesting territory. I have heard that it is possible that a deal was reached, that these entities were supposedly, with the military, we will leave you alone if you allow us to experiment without killing so many people. But then they started, like you said, they started seeing child abductions and human mutilation. And so maybe these things were just not sticking to the deal. And if they kind of got you by the balls, what can you do about it? I think
exactly.
I know this is, bear with me here, but the show Stranger Things is this premise that they have opened a doorway that they don't know how to close. And I think that may be what we're looking at here. I think that potentially they have messed around so much that now they have opened a can of worms they don't know how to close. And it is, in my opinion, possible that goes back to when we began detonating atomic bombs, because we had actually created new isotopes of elements or these new isotopes that had not existed in the world until we detonated those bombs. And so if these things did not exist, where did they come from? The doorway is between non-existence and existence, and that's scary. But that's just a theory. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's similar. Nigel Kerner, he passed away a few years ago. He had some similar theories regarding UFOs and aliens, and also David Lynch and Mark Frost, who wrote Twin Peaks. That was the picture that Frost painted in his kind of non-TV work on Twin Peaks. That and it's depicted to a certain extent in the third Twin Peaks season, where the nuclear detonation at Trinity kind of opens a portal and through which certain forms of evil come.